Good morning, faithful listeners. I am so excited that you're here to share a delicious cup of hot coffee with me as we discuss 2 Kings 14. Today's chapter is a long one. We're going to be talking about 4 different kings today, kind of all in like rapid fire, but it's a really interesting chapter that gets to the heart of why idol worship is such a bad idea. So once again, grab your delicious hot beverage, whether it's coffee or tea, and if you're looking for a good coffee brand, you got to check out 7 Weeks Coffee. It's the coffee brand that supports life in the womb. It is a delicious cup of coffee, and they also offer organic coffee that is pesticide and mold free. And they also have K-Cups now. For those of you who have Keurigs, 7 Weeks Coffee does K-Cups now for you guys also. So you should definitely check them out. They have pretty much every coffee option that you could want, whether it's whole bean or ground or organic or Keurig, whatever you want, they pretty much got it. And they're a great company also that donate 10% of their profits to pregnancy centers across. But when you use my code, 10% of your purchase will go to a pregnancy center and 15% will benefit P40 Ministries. So check them out. And let's go ahead and read 2 Kings 14, the entire chapter today. I'll be reading as I usually do from the WEB. In the 2nd year of Joash, son of Jehoaz, king of Israel, Amaziah the son of Joash, king of Judah, began to reign. He was 25 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned for 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jehoaddin of Jerusalem. He did that which was right in Yahweh's eyes, yet not like David his father. He did according to all that Joash his father had done. However, the high places were not taken away. The people still sacrificed and burned incense in the high places. As soon as the kingdom was established in his hand, he killed his servants who had slain the king his father. But the children of the murderers he didn't put to death, according to that which is written in the book of the law of Moses, as Yahweh commanded, saying, The fathers shall not be put to death for the children, nor the children be put to death for the fathers, but every man shall die for his own sin. He killed 10,000 Edomites in the valley of Salt, and took Selah by war, and called its name Joktheel to this day. Then Amaziah sent messengers to Jehoash, the son of Jehoahaz, son of Jehu, king of Israel, saying, Come, let's look one another in the face. Jehoash, the king of Israel, sent to Amaziah, king of Judah, saying, The thistle that was in Lebanon sent to the cedar that was in Lebanon, saying, Give your daughter to my son as wife. Then a wild animal that was in Lebanon passed by and trampled down the thistle. You have indeed struck Edom, and your heart has lifted you up. Enjoy the glory of it and stay at home. For why should you meddle to your harm, that you fall, even you and Judah with you? But Amaziah would not listen. So Jehoash, king of Israel, went up, and he and Amaziah, king of Judah, looked one another in the face at Beth Shemesh, which belongs to Judah. Judah was defeated by Israel, and each man fled to his tent. Jehoash, king of Israel, took Amaziah, king of Judah, the son of Jehoash, the son of Ahaziah, at Beth Shemesh, and came to Jerusalem, then broke down the wall of Jerusalem from the gate of Ephraim to the corner gate, 400 cubits. He took all the gold and the silver and all the vessels that were found in Yahweh's house, and in the treasures of the king's house, the hostages also, and returned to Samaria. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoash which he did, and his might, and how he fought with Amaziah the king of Judah, aren't they written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? Jehoash slept with his fathers, and he was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel, and Jeroboam his son reigned in his place. Amaziah the son of Joash, the king of Judah, lived after the death of Jehoash son of Jehoahaz, king of Israel, for 15 years. Now the rest of the acts of Amaziah, aren't they written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? They made a conspiracy against him in Jerusalem, and he fled to Lachish, but they sent after him to Lachish and killed him there. They brought him on horses, and he was buried at Jerusalem with his fathers in David's city. All the people of Judah took Azariah, who was 16 years old, and made him king in the place of his father Amaziah. He built Elath and restored it to Judah. After that, the king slept with his fathers. In the 15th year of Amaziah the son of Joash king of Judah, Jeroboam the son of Joash king of Israel began to reign in Samaria for 41 years. He did that which was evil in Yahweh's sight. He didn't depart from all the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, with which he made Israel to sin. He restored the border of Israel from the entrance of Hamath to the sea of the Arabah, according to Yahweh the God of Israel's word, which he spoke by his servant Jonah, the son of Amittai the prophet, who was from Gath-Hepher. For Yahweh saw the affliction of Israel, that it was very bitter for all, slave and free, and there was no helper for Israel. Yahweh didn't say that he would blot out the name of Israel from under the sky, but he saved them by the hand of Jeroboam the son of Joash. Now the rest of the acts of Jeroboam, and all that he did, and his might, and how he fought, and how he recovered Damascus and Hamath, which had belonged to Judah, for Israel, aren't they written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? Jeroboam slept with his fathers, even with the kings of Israel, and Zechariah, his son, reigned in his place. So there's a lot going on in this chapter because we're jumping back and forth between Israel and Judah. And their names are very similar, so it gets kind of confusing here. But it says here that during the reign of Joash, the king of Israel, Amaziah, the son of Joash, king of Judah, began to reign. So there's two Joashes, one in Israel and one in Judah. But the one in Judah had just died due to a conspiracy against him. We talked about that in the previous chapter where Joash was killed by a couple servants who absolutely hated him. So Joash's son, Amaziah, became the next king and reigned over Judah. And it says in verse 2 that he was 25 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 29 years in Jerusalem, the capital of Judah, and his mother's name was Jehoiadin of Jerusalem. So his mother was a native to Judah, specifically a native to Jerusalem. So most likely she was of the tribe of Judah. And it says that Amaziah, this new king, did that which was right in Yahweh's eyes, but not to the same degree like David had so many generations before this. You know, David was the best king of Israel for the most part. He loved God and was called a man after God's own heart. So of course, you know, David was kind of the role model for what Yahweh worship looked like back in these days. And Amaziah, though he worshiped Yahweh, did not do it to the same degree that David had, meaning that Amaziah's heart was not fully in line with God. So instead of doing like David did, it says that Amaziah did like his dad Joash did. And if you guys remember the whole story of Joash a couple chapters back, we talked about how Joash started out as a very good king. You know, he started reigning when he was 7 years old. He was raised in the temple of God. He was advised by the high priest named Jehoiada. And during the entire time that Jehoiada was alive advising him, Joash remained a very good king. But then like the second Jehoiada died, Joash sort of like went off the deep end and started doing all sorts of crazy things, including Asherah worship. And then he actually killed one of Jehoiada's sons, who was a prophet, because he didn't like how he was prophesying. So Joash, though he started out good, towards the end of his life, became a very bad king. He became so bad, actually, that a couple of his servants plotted to kill him and were successful. And so that is how Joash ended up dying. So Amaziah becomes king right after Joash. And the first thing that he does was to find the two servants that had killed the king and to kill them. And this was the right thing to do because those two servants had committed an act of treason and murder. Even though the reason that those servants had killed the king was because the king had killed that prophet and they were really upset about that, it still didn't give them the right to commit murder because the king had committed murder. So the servants were in the wrong, even though they had a heart for that prophet that King Joash had killed. But it says that when Amaziah killed these two servants, he tried to do things as close to the Old Testament law as he could. It says that he only killed the two servants and did not touch their families. So didn't hurt their kids or their wives or anything like that. Just the two men that had actually done the sin. And that's what it says here in verse 5. According to that which is written in the book of the law of Moses, as Yahweh commanded, saying, the fathers shall not be put to death for the children, nor the children be put to death for the fathers, but every man shall die for his own sin. Amaziah read that law and did the best he could to follow it while enacting judgment on those two servants who had killed his father. Now it mentions after this in verse 7 and 8 that Amaziah waged a war against the Edomites. It says he killed 10,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt and took Selah by war and called its name Joktheel to this day. Now, I don't know if you guys remember this, but Judah had once been in control of Edom for a very long time. But then during the reign of King Jehoram, remember the bad king that married Ahab's daughter? Edom rebelled against Judah, gained enough power to get their own king, and become a sovereign nation apart from Judah. That's all talked about in 2 Kings chapter 8, verses 20 through 22. It says, in the days of Jehoram, Edom revolted from under the hand of Judah and made a king over themselves. Then Jehoram crossed over to Zair and all of his chariots with him, and he rose up by night and struck the Edomites who surrounded him with the captains of the chariots, and the people fled to their tents. So Edom revolted from under the hand of Judah to this day. And then Libnah revolted at the same time. That obviously was not a good look for King Jehoram, because any king that loses land during the time that he's king is looked at as a very weak king. But now it says that Amaziah, his great-grandson, brought some of it back from Edom. This is back in 2 Kings 14, starting in verse 7. Amaziah killed 10,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt and took Selah by war and called its name Joktheel to this day. So Amaziah was very successful in gaining some land back from the Edomites. Amaziah became very arrogant after this battle was won for him. So what he tried to do after this was target Israel and force Israel to try to be under his hand once again, just like it was back in the days of King David. It says, then Amaziah sent messengers to Joash, the son of Jehoahaz, son of Jehu, king of Israel, saying, come, let's look one another in the face. And that's, of course, just Old English to say, let's battle it out. You know, let's have a duel here. So Jehoash, the king of Israel, sends a response to Amaziah, the king of Judah, and he says, the thistle that was in Lebanon sent to the cedar that was in Lebanon, saying, give your daughter to my son as wife. Then a wild animal that was in Lebanon passed by and trampled down the thistle. And of course, this is just Joash insulting the crap out of Amaziah. He gives this fable in response. He's like, look, there was a beautiful cedar tree in Lebanon, and this thistle, who thought that he was on the same level of this cedar, demanded that the cedar give his daughter in marriage to the thistle's son. But then as the thistle is making this demand, a wild animal comes and tramples it under its foot, and it dies. And so Joash is saying that Amaziah is like this thistle that has no place asking the tall, beautiful cedar tree for any demands whatsoever. And then he says in this letter, you have indeed struck Edom, and your heart has lifted you up, meaning you've gotten arrogant. So enjoy the glory of getting Edom back and stay at home. For why should you meddle to your harm that you fall, even you and Judah with you? So even though the king of Israel was very snarky with his response to Amaziah, he was actually right in a way, because he's telling Amaziah, why are you meddling in things that aren't your concern? You know, you had your success in Edom. Take it for what it is. Don't make Judah fall because of your arrogance. But Amaziah would not listen. Verse 11. So Joash, king of Israel, went up, and he and Amaziah, the king of Judah, looked one another in the face at Beth Shemesh, which belongs to Judah. Judah was defeated by Israel, and each man fled to his tent. After this huge success that Amaziah and Judah have in Edom, they get completely slaughtered by Israel. And this is a big embarrassment, actually, because if you're looking at where Israel is right now in this moment in time, they're not doing the best. They're getting targeted by Syria quite often. And Syria was really weak at this time period because Assyria was gaining a lot of land for themselves and really targeting Syria. But Syria, really desperate to get more land, started targeting Israel and was actually succeeding quite a bit. But because God was really gracious to Israel, even though Israel was, falling into sin and idol worship all the time, God was protecting Israel against Syria and even gave Joash some victory over Syria. But Israel was not particularly strong at this point in time. So this was an embarrassing defeat for Judah, quite honestly. It says that Judah was defeated, each man fled. Joash, king of Israel, took Amaziah, the king of Judah, as hostage and came to Jerusalem. And it says, broke down the wall of Jerusalem from the gate of Ephraim to the corner gate, 400 cubits. So not only is Judah now deeply defeated by Israel, but Israel embarrasses Judah even more by breaking down Jerusalem's walls, this very fortified city. According to the historian Josephus, how this was able to be accomplished because, Jerusalem was a really robust city. Apparently, when Joash took Amaziah as hostage, he told Amaziah, I'm going to kill you unless you let me in to Jerusalem. And Amaziah, terrified for his life, ended up allowing all of the chariots of Israel into Jerusalem. So they just walked right into Jerusalem. And then once they were inside, from the inside, they tore down the walls of Jerusalem. And not only did they do that, but they also took all of the gold and all of the silver and all of the vessels that were in Yahweh's house and in the treasures of the king's house. And they took hostages also and then returned back to Samaria. So Israel completely shellacked Judah and then goes back home happily with their plunder that they got from Yahweh's temple. And you guys might be wondering at this point, how did this happen? Because it says at the beginning of this chapter that Amaziah was a pretty decent king. He started out good. But Joash, the king of Judah, it actually says was evil in Yahweh's sight. So how could an evil king win over a good king? Well, in order to get the full context of the story, you gotta go over to 2 Chronicles chapter 25, which talks more about Amaziah and some of the actually really terrible things that Amaziah ended up doing, which caused this defeat between Judah and Israel. Verses 14 through 16 says, this is from the WEB, Now after Amaziah had come from the slaughter of the Edomites, he brought the gods of the children of Seir and set them up to be his gods, and bowed down himself before them and burned incense to them. Therefore Yahweh's anger burned against Amaziah, and he sent to him a prophet, who said to him, Why have you sought after the gods of the people, which have not delivered their own people out of your hand? As he talked with him, the king said, Have we made you one of the king's counselors? Stop. Why should you be struck down? So the prophet stopped and said, I know that God has determined to destroy you, because you have done this and have not listened to my counsel. Apparently, Amaziah got really, tempted by the gods of the Edomites for some reason. And so when he defeats the Edomites, he takes their gods with them, brings them back to his palace, sets them up in his courtyard or something to bow down and start worshiping these gods. Probably also while he was worshiping Yahweh, by the way. A lot of mixed religions typically happened in Israel's and Judah's history, where they would worship God, but also worship, Asherah or something like that alongside God. So Amaziah starts worshiping these gods. God obviously gets very angry. So he sends a prophet to warn Amaziah to stop doing this terrible thing. And the prophet, who is unnamed, says to Amaziah, Why are you worshiping these gods? Because clearly they're not even gods, because they weren't even able to protect the Edomites from you. You went into the land of the Edomites, they were crying out to their gods the entire time, and their gods did nothing. So why are you worshiping these foreign gods that can't do anything for you or anybody? And the king gets angry. He's like, how dare you? have we made you one of my counselors? Shut up. If you keep talking, I will kill you, is what the king says. So the prophet shuts up and he says, okay, you know what? You're not going to listen to me. And because of that, God is going to strike you down because you have not listened to him or to my advice. And this happens right before Amaziah sends that letter to the king of Israel. So yeah, Amaziah started out as a good king, but did not end up as a good king, which is very common throughout the kings and judges and basically all of Israel's and Judah's leaders. But after Israel goes into Judah and plasters it and comes back home, it says that, going back to 2 Kings 14, that Joash dies. And we don't know how many years after this Joash died, but it doesn't seem like that much time passed. And it says that Amaziah still was alive even after Joash had died. And I don't know exactly what happened to Amaziah. I don't know if he remained a captive in Israel for a really long time, or if he was allowed to go back home. It's possible that he was allowed to go back. But it mentions that Amaziah lived for 15 years after Joash died. He was so unpopular by this point that he suffered the same fate that his dad did. He was killed by some servants. It says in verse 19, they made a conspiracy against him in Jerusalem, and he fled to Lachish, so I guess he heard about this conspiracy against him. But they sent after him at Lachish and killed him there. Then they brought him back on horses, and he was buried at Jerusalem with his fathers in David's city. So Amaziah, though he was a good king to start, was a very, very unpopular king at the end of his life, suffered the exact same fate that his father had suffered only a couple decades before. All the people took Azariah, or Uzziah, depending on the version that you're reading, who was 16 years old, and made him king in the place of his father Amaziah. He rebuilt Elath and restored it to Judah. After that, the king slept with his fathers. We'll definitely talk about Uzziah later on, but that was kind of like the gist of his life in those two short little verses. But after talking about all of these kings of Judah, scripture switches to talking about the kings of Israel now. It says that Jeroboam, the son of Joash, the king of Israel, began to reign in Samaria for 41 years. So he reigned the longest, I believe, out of all of the dynasty of Jehu. Jeroboam reigned, I think, 2 decades longer than pretty much everybody. He did that which was evil in Yahweh's sight. He didn't depart from all the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, with which he made Israel to sin. But in spite of that, he was a very successful king. It says he restored the border of Israel from the entrance of Hamath to the Sea of Arabah, according to Yahweh, the God of Israel's word, which he spoke by his servant Jonah, the son of Amittai, the prophet who was from Gath-Hepher. Now, of course, this is the same Jonah that we know of who was swallowed by the giant fish. And I'm very excited to talk about the book of Jonah when we finally get to it. But Jonah, such a fascinating prophet. He was alive at this time. And he apparently gave a prophecy to King Jeroboam of Israel. And Jeroboam fulfilled this prophecy. For Yahweh saw the affliction of Israel, that it was very bitter for all, slave and free, and there was no helper for Israel. This shows that Yahweh still had a lot of mercy on Israel. Though Israel was going on a path that led further and further away from God, God still didn't like seeing what was happening to Israel, though Israel was causing its own destruction. Following God equals stability, but following your heart equals chaos. And that's what Israel was doing. They were following whatever their little hearts desired. And of course, those hearts were leading them further and further away from God, because as we know what scripture says, the heart is deceitfully wicked. You know, it deceives you into thinking that things are good, but it's actually really bad. And so when people follow their hearts, they are typically following something that leads them away from God. But God felt bad when he saw the affliction of Israel. He saw how people were suffering. He saw that the slave and the free both were just absolutely miserable from what they had done to themselves. So God would not blot out the name of Israel from under the sky, but he saved them by the hand of Jeroboam, the son of Joash. He saved Israel by using a very wicked man. It mentions here that Jeroboam was wicked, but God used him to save an entire nation. But to finish up Jeroboam's life, the rest of the acts of Jeroboam and all that he did and his might and how he fought and how he recovered Damascus and Hamath, which had belonged to Judah for Israel, aren't they written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? Jeroboam slept with his fathers, even with the kings of Israel, and Zechariah, his son, reigned in his place. So if you're reading through this whole chapter, there's so many things we can pick up from it. But I think the biggest theme is that worshiping things that are not Yahweh leads to issues and chaos and destruction. Both for Amaziah, the king of Judah, who started worshiping the gods that he brought back from Edom, and also Israel, who was worshiping whatever gods they wanted to worship. Things were miserable for them, to the point where God had to send them a deliverer because they were absolutely miserable. So moral of this chapter, worship God because that is the only thing that's going to bring stability. Well, faithful listeners, check out the new t-shirt that is up on the website. It is for you crazy tea drinkers. That is now up and ready to view, and I would love for you guys to take a gander at that. But faithful listeners, tomorrow we will be in the book of Galatians, chapter 5. There's only 2 more chapters in Galatians before we move into the book of Ephesians. So I hope you guys tune in tomorrow, 6 a.m., or whenever you choose to wake up and listen. Until tomorrow, happy listening, and God bless.